Alcoholics Anonymous. Jesse, would you like to read these?
Yeah, sure.
My man, thank you. Jesse, Alcoholics?
Yeah.
Like a drunk prospector, belt drawn over the last ounce of food, a fixture up move. Joy at release from a lifetime of frustration, knew no bounds. Father feels he has struck something better than gold. For a time, he may try to hug the new treasure to himself. He may not see at once that he has barely scratched a limitless load, which will pay dividends only if he mines it for the rest of his life and insists on giving away the entire product. Our 12th step, carrying the message, is the basic service that the AA Fellowship gives. This is our principal aim and the main reason for our existence. Therefore, AA is more than a set of principles. It is a society of alcoholics in action. We must carry the message, else we ourselves can wither, and those who haven't been given the truth may die.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone new coming back or visiting who would like to introduce themselves? All right. Would anyone who's had a spiritual awakening as a result of the 12 steps and is willing to assist someone new, just coming back or looking for a new experience, please raise your hand to identify yourself. Thank you. And may we please have the collection and observe our 7th tradition while I read some announcements. If anyone would like to join this group, please just stick around and see me after the meeting. Our business meetings are the last Friday of each month, just prior to this, in between the book study. This group does have 2 commitments monthly, one at AdCare in North Kingstown on the 5th Wednesday, and one at CCA in Providence on the 2nd Tuesday, both at 7 p.m. Please just let us know if you'd like to join. Tonight we have no anniversaries. Does anyone else have any AA-related announcements? All right. And as an AA meeting open to alcoholics and non-alcoholics alike with recordings that may eventually become publicly available, we'd like to share a reading on anonymity from our 11th and 12th traditions. 11. Our relations with the general public should be characterized by personal anonymity. We think AA ought to avoid sensational advertising. Our names and pictures as AA members ought not to be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed. Our relations should be guided by the principle of attraction rather than promotion. There's never need to praise ourselves. We feel it better to let our friends recommend us. 12, and finally, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the principle of anonymity has an immense spiritual significance. It reminds us that we are to place principles before personalities, that we are actually to practice a genuine humility. This to the end that our great blessings may never spoil us, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of Him who presides over us all. Our speaker will now have the floor until about 5 of. At this time, I do ask that you please take your phones out and just put them on silent. With Dan's permission, we are recording.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, would you please now help us welcome our speaker for this evening from Warwick, Rhode Island, Dan F.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Daniel. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's a pleasure to be here tonight to kick off this meeting and make great success and God's blessings on it. I've had experience with the steps as laid out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with a loving God and a spiritual advisor and meetings just like this with beautiful people like you. My sobriety date is October 25th of 2012. And I was raised in an alcoholic household. I was the alcoholic. So that's skip that off right there. I was 4 to 5 kids. I was the 4th boy, the only redhead, and then my sister was born when I was 5, which triggered the first resentment, and stole my son, But no, I grew up in a beautiful home, and I always say that I was conceived in faith, born in faith, and raised in faith, and I was raised in a home where faith came first, and family, and then hard work. And we treasured our friends so much, as did my parents, that they became part of the family. So that's what we were raised with. And so with those principles in mind, growing up, I really needed for nothing, but with my temperament and my mind, I wanted for everything that I didn't have. And I always wanted younger parents, and I always wanted to be an only child, and I always wanted it's just, looking back on it, I always wanted everything that everyone else had, and I was never content. My father always said, always looking for the next great time, Daniel, or always wanting more. And I was nicknamed the Mouth at 4 years old. My father would just have to say, "Oh, mouth." So whether that mouth was going off in the backyard, or the mouth was going off down the hallway, or down the street, my father would be able to say it, and I knew that it was my time to shut up. But like I said, I grew up in a great home, and I always say that I grew up like Leave It to Beaver, and then I picked up a drink at 11 years old, and I became Eddie Haskell, and I did whatever I needed to do to, play the boy next door, and I would yes everyone to death, and then do whatever I wanted. It's actually how my mother says that I got through high school, is that I yesed her and my father to death, and I did whatever I wanted. And, I went from being like a really A-B student in elementary school and early junior high to becoming like a complete, academics was just not on my priority list. I went to school to socialize. And my report cards always say, and my good friend who's a teacher, she always said she had plenty of students like me. But my report card always said that I failed to hand in homework assignments. I did poorly on tests and quizzes, but I was a pleasure to have in class. And drove my mother absolutely crazy. She didn't understand, and she would literally, I think she would get more mad at the teachers than she would at me, because she was like, I don't understand how he can be a pleasure, to have in class. He doesn't do anything. Yes, but he's very polite, Mrs. Friel, and he's just always so kind, and he gets along with his classmates, and he brings good energy. Yeah, because he doesn't do anything. There's no stress. He doesn't have any stress. So that was my life in high school. I worked after school because sports, I would have, I don't lift weights because they're heavy, and I don't run because it makes me tired. So I didn't understand, what was that going to do for me? So I was like, I'll work and I'll make money. And that way I can, really, I always wanted more. My mother always told me that I had a champagne appetite with a beer income. And she said that before she realized what an issue it would be, but in more than one way, pun intended. But so I would go to school, and then I'd work after school, and then I would go out at night. And that was my whole high school career. I was the president of the band. I didn't know how to play my instrument. And how you get away with that is you just pick the instrument that no one else is playing. And no one was playing the French horn for good reason, because I still to this day don't know how to play the French horn, but I played it for 4 years, or made people think I did, which was fine till I got a solo. Then I got really awkward in the Pirates of the Caribbean. But we just blamed that on the Pirates, right? So, became president of the band, and I got this Band Spirit Award, and, did everything I needed to do. And I passed high school by cleaning out a 121-gallon fish tank. And true story, to pass biology. Thank God for my teacher at that time. But I did. I got along, and I did what I needed to do, and I left high school by the skin of my teeth. But there was one thing I did do, and that was I did scouting. And scouting, I would say, probably kept me alive, because it gave me something to work towards. It kept me disciplined. It kept me... I'm a hands-on learner and project-based learning. Before project-based learning was a thing, that's how I best excelled. I never liked being lectured or talked to. I got that enough at home. I didn't want to get it at school. So I did do that well. So when I got out of high school, I went right into the workforce and the bar rooms. So I celebrated my 21st birthday 4 times at the local bar. And, and I quickly lost my license at the age of 18. So, at one point I'm in the paper, in June of 2006 for, being an Eagle Scout. And then 6 months later, we're trying to keep my name out of the paper for a refusal with possession charge. So and I got away with those charges, and they were, we tucked them under the rug, and I had to pay the fine, and I wasn't able to get my license back. And the funny thing was like, I thought that I deserved my license back. So I'm going to show the state I'm not going to pay off those fines. Well, joke's on me, I didn't realize that they take them out of your taxes. So if you don't pay them, they just keep taking them out of your state tax, which was really amazing. 7 years later, when I finally got my license back, I was like, wow, I didn't realize you got money back in your taxes. But so I lost my license, and so then I just became this it's amazing how we manipulate and how we can really, the cunning, baffling, and powerful aspect, and the ability to be able to convince people. Like at this point, I'm 19 years old. I have a driver. I don't have a cell phone, but I have other people's phones. I have my own dry goods business, network marketing. So, and then I'm working 3 jobs. And it's like, I'm looking back on it, I'm like, how? Like, how did that happen? Like, how did I pull that off? Like, but I did until I couldn't anymore, until the gig was up, and then I took a geographical cure. And at 21, I took a geographical cure to the place that I loved and adored as a child. And I started working down there and quickly moved up to management there. Don't know why, again. And then they hired me nationally to train people. And so I thought, I was like, all right, now I've got a career field that I think I may be able to pull this off. And it was with scouting. And I did okay until tragedy struck, and I had no coping skills because I could not handle life on life's terms. And tragedy struck in 2011 when a boy passed away in his sleep. And then it all, no longer the geographical cure worked anymore, because now I had a history here and I didn't have mechanisms to be able to cope with that. So I was told, you better get your stuff together, you better get some counseling, you better get healthy, you better make some different decisions, and I didn't. So the following year I went back and in a management position again, and a gentleman went up on the OPSO course and he died. So, which by the way, no one had ever died in 100 years at this institution until these 2 years. And so what ended up happening for me was that basically the levee just broke. And there was no more ability to hide it or to cover it up. And the absolute demoralization that this book talks about occurred for me, and I got to live it firsthand. And for the first time in my life, I'd always been told that I had a drinking problem. I was always told I was an alcoholic. I was always told I was a drug addict. I was always told that I was a drunk. I was always told a lot of things. Nobody ever asked me. So that day when I got called up to that main office, and my childhood hero, essentially, who I'd always looked up, whose son was killed by a drunk driver, by the way, in 1999, asked me point blank if I had a problem with alcohol. And no one had ever asked me before, and so therefore I never had to respond. So if somebody tells you something, that does not provoke a response. Somebody asks you a question, they expect an answer. So no one had ever asked it to me before. So when he asked me, do you have a problem with alcohol, son? And I said yes, there was no taking that back. And it was probably the first time that I had myself had to acknowledge, here we are, August of 2012, that yes, I do have a problem with alcohol. And so I wish I could tell you that I went home and I got sober. I didn't. I spent the next 2 months drinking and drugging until, God bless you, Dean, and until I lost someone dear in my life. And again, a trend, if you notice the pattern. Again, I hit another rock bottom, and I binged for another week until I came to one morning, and on October 25th of 2012, and I went to get out of bed, and I fell to my knees, not by choice, but because I was probably 110 pounds soaking wet, and I'm sitting down right now, but I'm 6'1", so 6'1", 110 pounds is probably not a healthy weight. I was yellow, I was jaundiced, I had bruises on my legs from the restless leg and the blood thinning, and I hadn't probably eaten in a couple of days properly. And the only thing left on my wall was a symbol of my faith. So you go back to like 17, 18 years old where, yeah, I lived this, this Eddie Haskell life, but I had promise. I had every opportunity that my brothers had before me. My family had built a great life around me, and I had everything that anyone could have really wanted or hoped for. And this was just, my life was in shambles. And here I am, 24 years old, and I'm on death's door. And I'm not stupid. And so I know I'm on death's door. And the sad thing is I lost an uncle in 1995 to alcoholism and drug addiction. And I'll tell you, like, that day scared the crap out of me because I was thinking, this is like his last moments before that hemorrhage occurred inside of him and killed him. And he died by himself in his apartment because of this alcoholism and addiction. And I didn't want that. And I didn't want that at the time, I'll be honest with you. It wasn't even about me, it was about my mother. I didn't want that from my mother. My mother's a neonatal NICU nurse. And she has saved babies' lives, and she has brought them back from the grips of hell, and she's placed them back into their parents' arms. And here my mother couldn't even save her own child. And that was gut-wrenching to watch. Like, I didn't even really look at myself and be upset. I was more upset about seeing my mother look at me. To a point that I couldn't even look at my mother, and my mother couldn't even look at me without crying. And my mother is the salt of the earth. She wanted for three things. She wanted to be a nurse, she wanted to marry my father, and she wanted a large family. And she had those three things by the age of 30. So that day I knew I needed to do something. And so I was already on my knees, and I saw the symbol of faith on my wall that had been hanging there since I was in second grade. And I just asked God for his direction. Little did I know what I was asking was for more than just God's direction, but for what little did I know was more than just the drinking and the drugging. Little did I know what was going to occur as a result of it, asking for God's direction. I crawled back into bed, and I got the number for a treatment facility, and I called that treatment facility, and a woman stayed on the phone with me, and she called me back every half hour until there was a bed available. And my father brought me to that treatment facility. And I gotta be honest with you, I don't think my father and I had really spoken a civil word to one another in 8 years. I should say, let me be honest about that for a second. I hadn't spoken a civil word to my father in 8 years. Let me correct that. My father brought me into that treatment facility, and I'll never forget, Lissa and Nicole were the nurses, and Lissa was throwing all my stuff out of a black trash bag, and my father hugged me, which was crazy for me to think about because I didn't let anyone hug me at that time. He left, and so I'm sitting there, and I'll never forget, Lissa's throwing all my stuff into a black trash bag, and here I am with my Pico and my all these clothes that I brought because I had to look my best in rehab. And it was 2012, and the nurse Nicole says, now I can't hold a pen without help, okay? That's how bad I am. I'm shaking like a leaf. I'm a mess. She says, how long are you willing to stay here? And I said, I'm willing to stay as long as it takes, but I need to vote. And so Nicole's like, I'm sorry, what? And I was like, I need to vote. And she was like, so Lissa behind me, I'll never forget, was like, honey, you got bigger issues than voting. And I was like, but I'll be honest with you, I really felt I'm being honest with you, I thought, listen, I need to be, people are relying on me, okay? They're relying on me. I'm a big deal. I really did think that at that time. So they laughed, they got a good chuckle out of it. I didn't really quite think they were lying. I was ready, to read my constitutional rights. But they laughed and they chuckled. And they brought me straight to a meeting, which, by the way, later days after that, I realized that other people came in and they got to lay in bed for a day. They knew I was real sick. They brought me straight down to a meeting. And a group from Narragansett came down. I'll never forget, it was Dan and Nicole. And they had one of them had a big book with them. I think it was Dan. And I see Dan all the time too, right? And now. And they talked about how they stayed sober and how they got to leave that facility without the alarm going off. And I never studied in my life, really. But I started studying that night. I started studying every person that came in that room at 7 o'clock every night for the next 28 days. And I learned from all of you that, you all had different stories, but you all had things in common, is that you got a home group, you got a sponsor. Some of you worked out of the book, some of you worked out of a thinner book. I listened to everything you guys said. Sometimes I'd take notes and I would have my roommate quiz me. So I knew about your cat that you didn't want, that's the only thing your ex-wife left you with, and how much you drank to fill a 50-gallon drum, and I learned all those things. And because I literally hung to every word that you people said, because again, you got to leave that facility without the alarm going off. I did not until 28 days. And I did think it was a career opportunity at one point, actually, by the way, because I called my mom to set up a family meeting. And I said, listen, I'm really busy. They have a donor event coming in, and I'm helping. I've set up a duty roster, and we're making things happen in here for the donors. And my mom's like, this is not a career opportunity. And I was like, clearly, it's not a career opportunity. This would not be the place to start a career. And she was like, all right. And the story goes, she hung up the phone, and she looked at my father, and she goes, he thinks he's running a summer camp program. And I did. I started a kickball league, and some of us didn't have shoes, so the slipper socks had to work out in the grass. So thankfully, it was only November. But when I left that day, I've never been so scared in my life. And I'll never forget my mom, one, being completely just the nurses crying and everyone at the door. It literally looked like the scene from the Sandra Bullock film. And she was like, is there no HIPAA? Like, what is going on here? And like the nurses were like, does he have to leave? And I was like, what is wrong with these people? And that was like kind of my mom's first taste of like what we're all kind of like, kind of not a glum lot. And but we got into the car, and then like it was like my safety. Oh, by the way, I did get to vote. They did let me go vote, by the way. I had to come right back after chugging a caffeinated coffee that they weren't allowed to have. But we don't do this perfectly. So I'll never forget how scared I was. And like a little kid, I'm 24 years old at this time. My mother reaches over and she takes my hand and she says, "Are you ready?" And I was like, "Yeah, as ready as I'm ever going to be." And I came straight to the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous. And after getting a haircut, obviously, but priorities. So, I came right to the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I jumped right into the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I jumped right into the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got a home group, and I got a job in that home group, and I got a sponsor. I liked having a sponsor so much. I got 4 more after that, and there's one thing I did perfectly in this. It was the only thing I did perfectly, and that was I remained to pray. I hit my knees every morning, and I hit my knees every night. And I actually took that literally, because when you told me to get on my knees every morning, my grandparents founded a church right across the street from my parents' home. So I would go across the street to that. I'd walk across the street because I have a license. So I'd go across the street and I'd hit my knees there. And I ended up getting a job in that church as a janitor. And that was pretty cool because the priest also allowed me to go to meetings during the day. And so I'd go around to St. Paul's with the older folks. Good thing, because I hated young people. I hated young people and I hated men. You want to know why? Because I was both of those things. And I hated myself. So definitely didn't trust young people because I was a young person. And I definitely didn't trust men because I was a man. So just goes to show you how much I hated myself. I loved the day meetings, though, with the older people because, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents growing up, and they passed when I was relatively young. And I just loved the older people. And I'll be honest with you, I loved middle-aged women because they took care of me. They coddled me, and they made me feel good, and they loved me when I couldn't love myself. And so I ran with that. I ran for 4.5 years, going to meetings, not drinking, going to meetings, and having a job in my home group. And I had the spiritual tools laid at my feet multiple times by different people. And I had these tools laid out by some of the most well-respected individuals in Rhode Island AA. I had them laid at my feet by a florist. I had them laid at my feet by a mailman. I had them laid at my feet by several other people. I heard other people's example. I sat at a man's bedside as he took his last breaths. And one of the last things he said to me was contempt prior to investigation. God bless Al. And I watched that man pass on to the next life. And he was devoted to this big book. And I still wasn't ready to pick up the spiritual tools because that's how much in denial I was. And it came to a point, I was 4.5 years sober, and I had all these material things. I had the license back, I had the car, I had a job, I had a career, I had my own home, like, you know, I had everything, right? You looked at all the physical things, all the things that I continued to say, if I get those things, then I'll do the work. If I get these things, I'll do the work. And I was waking up at 4.5 years sober, completely irritable, discontented, and resentment filled. And I woke up every morning at one point, and at 4.5 years sober, thinking like, okay, whose life can I destroy today? One, because that was my career, and that was like part of my job, and or so I thought, and until you got through, and I just couldn't stand, like, and I was so mad because I was like, I'm 4.5 years sober, I should feel so good. And I thank God for the people that were around me because they loved me when I couldn't love myself. And they just loved me through it. Like, and you know, we laugh now because they were like, oh man, like they can go back to it. I have friends that are like, oh, remember at 4.5 years sober where life just smacked you in the face? Like, and we laugh about it, you know? My friend Grace, she talked about it at my 5-year anniversary. She's like, oh, it's so funny watching Dan get hit in the face with life. Like, and I was like, she's like, it's wonderful, you know? I have friends in this program, they're like, haha, he's crying, this is wonderful. And I'm like, because I was an iceberg, right? So I woke up 4.5 years sober, and I decided that Rhode Island AA was the problem, clearly, right? And so, you know, the old timers always used to say, if you stay in a barber shop long enough, you'll get a haircut. Well, if you leave me in a room long enough with a group of people, I'm going to hate every single one of them. Because I'm not going to take my inventory, I'm going to take all of theirs. And my friend Lisa always, we used to think it was funny, like we thought it was a joke, but there was actually a lot of truth to it. And I think we laugh about it now, it was her trying to tell me something at the time. She used to say, if you're struggling to identify your character defects, just sit next to Dan, he'll tell you what they are. And I was proud of that. Like, I was like, that's right, come here. I'll tell you what you have. I've been watching you for years. I'll tell you exactly what your problem is. But like, God forbid anyone ever told me what my problems were, because like, you were going to get it. You were going to get it. Like the verbal lashing or the verbal beatdown. And so I decided that Rhode Island AA was the problem. And clearly you were all messed up. And so I took a sabbatical from Rhode Island AA, and I went to Massachusetts AA. And I told everyone in the halls of Massachusetts AA that I was writing a 4-step. For you listening at home, I'm shaking my head no. I was not writing a 4-step. And everyone in those halls knew I wasn't writing a 4-step, as the joke was on me. And we all laugh about that now. Like, ha ha ha, you come in late, leave early. And like, I'm 4.5 years sober. That's like something you say about a newcomer. I'm 4.5 years sober. I think I have all the answers. And those people love me. And they didn't even know me, and they let me where I was at. And so I sat there for 6 months telling all those people that I was writing when I wasn't writing. And they would ask me, how are you doing? How's your writing? And I was under the impression, because, you know, I sat here long enough and I heard enough things. And it says in the 9-step or the 10-step promises, depends on what your, you know, perspective on that is, that it says halfway through we will be amazed. So being in communications and PR, I felt that one of my talking points should be that I'm amazed because I'm halfway through. Not a mathematician, everybody, because half of 12 is 6, not 4. So, how you doing, Dan? I'm amazed. Like, they're like, okay, keep coming. Like, I'm like, yeah, like I got this. Like, so, you know, like just the delusional thinking that we convince ourselves, right? And like just the dishonesty I had with myself. And so eventually the joke was on me. I went for 6 months to Massachusetts AA for God to really direct a man from Newport to be the one that I should ask to take me through this process, because I finally realized that meetings weren't just going to do it for me. Other people's sobriety wasn't going to do it for me. Other people's experiences weren't going to do it for me. You can read a book about somebody climbing a mountain all you want, and you can pretend that you know what it was like. You might be able to point out some trademarks on that mountain because you've read the book on it, but you've never experienced it. And you're only gypping yourself. And that's what I came to the realization, is that all these people in Rhode Island and in Massachusetts and in Florida at this point, because I was even traveling down to Naples to the 24-hour club down there and telling them I was writing too. So they, whole gig. I came to the realization that there was only one way out of this. And, there was two ways out of this, really. It was either death or just blot out my existence, right? So, because the death would have been the drink. So I asked that man from Newport to take me through this process, and he was so kind and loving and humble, and he asked me to meet him in Mattapoisett. So now we're in Fairhaven. No, we're in Fall River that night. That was Wednesday night men's meeting. And, which, by the way, I got tricked into going to a men's meeting. It's the only way I would have went to an all-men's meeting. I got tricked into going to a men's meeting, and those people did not coddle you at all. And man, not at all. Like, there was no cute looks were going to look at them, and they weren't going to tolerate that. So there was nothing. And the main thing is, nothing. No one in that room had anything I wanted physically, but majority of the men in that room had something I wanted, and that was their spirituality and their way of living and their freedom from self. And so he told me to meet him in Mattapoisett. I met him in Mattapoisett, which he slept through the entire meeting, which I was like, is this Mr. Magoo? Like, what's going on? Like, he's like 38 years old. Like, why is he sleeping? That's just how peace of mind he was. Like, he still can sleep in a meeting. It baffles me. And I was like, Jesus Christ. So I went up to him after the meeting, like I had arrived. I was like, hey, I'm here. And he's like, great, awesome. What are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, I got a lot of things planned. Like, why? He's like, well, meet me at my place in Newport. I'm like, Newport? What are you doing? Gina just put a toll on that thing? Like, I got to go to Newport? So I was like, okay, great. So I drove over the bridge. So now it's like we're in the World is Carmen San Diego scavenger hunt. So I go over to the bridge and I meet him there, and we sit down and we read for 6 hours, and we go through the readings for steps 1 and 2. And I learned more in those 6 hours than I really had in 4.5 years of Alcoholics Anonymous. I learned so much about this book, this process. I learned about myself, but then I also started to realize about all these people that God had placed in my life. And like, wow, how patient and tolerant and loving they all were with me over these past 4.5 years. And I came to the realization that I had been reading step 1 wrong this entire 4.5 years. I was reading step 1 as we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives have become unmanageable. That's not what step 1 says. Step 1 says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. In the English language, that dash is to put more emphasis on what's to come. So we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And what I came to the realization was okay, so I admitted I was powerless over alcohol. I did that on October 25th of 2012, and the obsession was lifted to drink and to drug. So why was my life unmanageable still? My life was unmanageable because I was trying to manage it. And not only was I really badly managing my life, I was trying to manage all of your lives. And in the positions I was put in professionally, I was trying to manage a lot of people's lives. And looking back on it, I'm like, oof, good thing God was there. Because, like, geez, I had my hands on some buttons that I really probably shouldn't have had at that time. And I came to the realization that I was screwed if I drink and I'm screwed if I don't drink. Because left to my own devices, I'm a mess. And I drag other people with me. So then, thank God, because then you move on to step 2, where God could and would restore us to sanity, right? So God can restore my sanity. And I came to the realization that any thought in my mind that is not, the first thought that enters my mind, if not immediately directed by God is insane. So if I enter a thought and I don't pass it through God, or I don't ask God's direction in it, it's insane. Because any action not directed by God, I have come to learn from my experience, is insane. Itself will run riot and leads me back to self-seeking, dishonesty, and fear. And then step 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. I didn't know what that meant. I wrote a lot of things at this point in my life and bullcrapped a lot of things in my life. I didn't know what turned our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So the man at that time broke it down to me that our thoughts and our actions, we made a decision to turn our thoughts and our actions over to the care of God as we understood Him. Now that made sense to me, because I knew that these thoughts that I had, which were thinking about just whose life I was going to destroy each day, was not God's will. I knew that the actions of when, meeting somebody at 5 a.m. in the gym to let them know I wanted them to do something a certain way in order, for things to go well for them and for me, that was not a good action. That was not a God-directed action. So I understood that. But I also understood, and it was smashed home to me, that the third step is not only a commitment with me and this other individual that is freely giving of themselves to take me through this process, but it's also a covenant with God. And that covenant, and you can break a contract and you can break a commitment with a friend, and it can be awkward when you see each other in the hallway or on the street. It can be awkward, but you can move on from that. You break a covenant with God, and as he said it, I found that life gets colorful. And I was like, okay. So I was ready to jump in on that Sunday to do the third step, and he said, no, I want you to go home and I want you to pray about this, and I really want you to take it seriously. Now I'm like, are you kidding me? It's another $4 over that bridge, man. But I did, and I went back over there and back to the West Bay, and where we know how to do it. And I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I had called him exactly 24 hours later. And he's like, great, meet me at St. Barnabas in Middletown, back over the bridge, at 10 o'clock tonight. Like, what? So back over the bridge I went, 10 o'clock at night in Middletown at this 24-hour chapel. And it was very like Da Vinci Code, very Dan Brown-esque. And, but we reviewed it again, and he smashed home again to me the importance of the commitment and the covenant. And he said, are you ready for this? And I said, I am. And because I knew at this point, everything else I had attempted, all the meetings and the meditation and the sound bowls and the retreats and, the guided meditations, like nothing was working. And I have to say, like, I had the most loving and God had put the most beautiful people in my life. And they all were, not all, but a lot of them were living a life free of self-will. And I wasn't. And I knew there was more for me, so I knew that this was the only option. And so we held hands, and he wasn't show-off. He's not a show-off. He opened up the book, and we read that third step prayer together. And we sat back, and he explained to me, and it says it in this book, that we took this step with an understanding person such as our spouse, partner, best friend, or spiritual advisor. So he said to me, I'm not your spouse, I'm not your partner, I just met you, so I'm obviously not your best friend, but I will be your spiritual advisor. And that meant something different to me, because like I shared earlier, I liked having a sponsor. I liked having sponsors. I wanted what they physically had. They had a nice job, they had a nice business, I liked their wife, I liked the way they did things, I liked the car that they drove, I liked the way they talked, I liked their social circle. But this man had something I wanted completely not physical, it was spiritual. And so spiritual advisor had depth and weight for me, and that made sense. So he smacked me in the chest with a notebook that had a baseball on it, and he's like, do you like baseball? I was like, I hate sports. He's like, well, good, write it down. And he said, the first notebook's on me, the rest are on you. And he said, God's will for you is to write. And so I drove back over that bridge, and I will tell you this, that I drove back over the Newport Bridge that night, and I hadn't felt the way I felt at that moment since I was 17 years old, and I had fallen in love for the first time. And anyone that has had that feeling and you remember those days or that first time you fell in love. And I remember at 17 thinking that in my head, and honest to God, I believed it at that time. And it was, I had every intent that I was going to do anything to keep this relationship. I was going to do everything to maintain this relationship. Well, that's how I felt, but with God. That I was going to do everything I can to maintain how I feel right now about this relationship with God. Now, I had a relationship with God my whole life, but I know this was about, I was taking it to another level. And just in that experience of the third step, and it says it, some of us have an instant experience, and I did. And I went home and I launched into vigorous action. I wish I could tell you I stayed in vigorous action. I did not. I bucked the hell out of this. And I'll be honest, but I realized what he meant, that my life would become colorful. Because every time I didn't write, my life became colorful. And every time I wrote, life would calm down again. And it was like relieving, like it's like loosening that pressure valve, like when you it was unbelievable. And I wrote, 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 and I balked, and I balked, and I balked, and I wrote. And I'll be honest with you, some people clean behind their refrigerator, some people clean their office. I decided right as I was coming up to my turnarounds, end of my turnarounds, up to my fears, that I was going to clear out my whole basement. So I got a 20-yard dumpster and emptied my entire basement into the 20-yard dumpster. I did that in 12 hours. So now I need to get back to writing. My neighbors were like literally on their porch watching this. They had never seen a 20-yard dumpster get filled so quickly. They thought it was amazing. But again, just so I didn't have to write. And I ended up finishing that writing on a week in June. And I had 586 people, 152 institutions, and 22 principals. I had 211 fears. I had 15 people, 0 animals, and a few objects. And I called my spiritual advisor and I said, I finished my writing. And he said, that's fantastic. What are you doing tomorrow? I said, well, I'm about to start my busiest week of my profession at that time. So I'm busy this week. So maybe we can reconnect next week. And he's like, okay, I want you to go back and read pages such and such and such and such. And then, and then pray on it and call me. I said, okay. So I called my friend, who is this about 5'1" woman from Worcester, who had first taken me to the Fairhaven meetings in Massachusetts. And little things come in big packages. Big things come in little small packages. And I called her up. And again, just remember back in the day when I told you that I didn't take to men, I didn't take to young people. So I called her up and I said, hey, I finished my writing. And she said, that's fantastic. So when do you start the reading? And I said, oh, I'm too busy this week. So, because I have to open up camp, and so I'm way too busy, so I'll call him next week and we'll get to it. She goes, really? Are you driving right now? And I said, yes. She goes, if you got hit by a frickin', and she didn't say frickin', if you got hit by a frickin' Mack truck right now, that camp is still opening with or without you. So I would reconsider, call Taylor, and get your ass to Newport tomorrow. And she hung up. And that's what I did, because I was afraid of that 5'1" woman. And I needed to be talked to like that. And so I called that man back up, and I headed to his house the next day. And we started doing the reading on the 5th step. And what an experience. You open it up and you have it laid out. At that point, there's 13 5-subject notebooks, and we lit a candle for God, and he just sat there and listened. And I will say that the first one was heavy. It was my father. And that poor man had 64 resentments. And we went through it, and then we got to my mother, and it was like a really heavy in the room. And we got to my mother, and one of the resentments was my mother has now raised 5 children, neonatal NICU nurse. I told you all about her, right? One of my resentments with my mother was that her spaghetti sauce wasn't thick enough. And my spiritual advisor, who's sitting on the couch in his living room at the time, was listening to me, and he just starts laughing. He just starts laughing so hard. He goes, man, you are so screwed. And we just started laughing, and we started laughing so hard that we were both in tears. Like, just how ridiculous and petty that here's this woman who, literally, sacrificed so much, and she didn't make a thick enough spaghetti sauce. And he's just like, you ever think that she had to feed 5 little bastards? You ever think about that? We just laughed so hard, and from that point on, the reading was it just flowed. And it took 17.5 hours to read in 3 sessions on a beautiful week in June. And I finished that 5th step, and I stood up, and he hugged me, and he said, "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous." And I was 6 years sober at the time. 6 years sober. And he sent me on my way to have that hour with God, and I put the book up on a shelf, and I went and sat down by the water, and I set my phone for an hour, and I threw my phone into the woods. And I sat there for an hour with God and reviewed in my head, what I had just done, and just prayed. And I'll never forget, this point where, I had my eyes closed, and this lion's face just, came into my view. And I immediately thought, wow, okay, I just faced the lion. Daniel in the lion's den. I just faced the lion. I faced myself. I faced all that garbage that had blocked me off from the sunlight of the Spirit, from being connected with God, of truly doing God's will. And I got up from that hour, and I reviewed the 5 principles, which, you get confused on that for a minute, and then you realize it's just the 5 previous steps. And then I called my spiritual advisor, and I said, "I'm ready to do the next." And he said, "All right, well, hit those knees and take that 6 and 7. And I did. And I'll tell you that I was deathly afraid of 6 and 7. And the reason was because my entire life at this point, I had needed to be sarcastic and deceitful, and I love toxic relationships. Give me an unhealthy woman, emotionally unavailable woman, and she was number 1. It was gonna work. It was gonna work. I didn't care if she had a boyfriend or not. It was gonna work. That was how I lived my life, and I was so afraid. I wasn't afraid of the 4th and the 5th step. I was afraid of losing all of those defenses. I was talking to a friend today about our defenses. And defenses, character defects, I was so afraid to let those go because I didn't know how I was going to live. But I had faith at this point because as of right now, everything that this man had guided me on and that God had guided me on and all these people that had shared their own experiences, they were okay. And so I knew I was going to be okay. And I hit my knees, and I did that step 6 and 7. And I went out and did God's bidding, which was to make amends. And I had amazing experiences, and it's true what they say. Halfway through, you will be amazed. What they meant was, halfway through your amends, you will be amazed. Not the steps, but through the amends. And I was absolutely amazed. 9 out of 10 times, miraculous things will occur. I will tell you that I've yet to have an amazing experience with an amends. I've had uncomfortable moments in the amends, but I've been amazed every single time. And I just grew as a stronger person, and I grew in those relationships. And one of those relationships, we hadn't spoken civilly to each other in 11 years. And today I talk to him on a regular basis. And, I went out there and I used to roll my eyes at people talking about 10, 11, and 12. And I live in 10, 11, and 12. Perfectly? No. But I do love step 10. I do love the fact that every night I can review, and every night I can review, but during the day I have the foundation every day, all day, to carry it with me. And when things crop up, to be able to look at my selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, and fear. And then if things happen, I'm able to make amends immediately, and to know and to stand in my own. And as long as I catch the selfishness and the dishonesty and the fear, then the self-seeking doesn't occur. And so when it says the self-seeking will disappear as a result of living in 10, 11, and 12, because then if I have a good understanding of myself as just dishonesty and fear, the actions don't occur. Therefore, then I don't have to make amends, because once the actions kick in and now I've caused offense and I've stepped on others' toes and they feel forced to retaliate, then I got to make amends. So if I'm constantly vigilant on this, life is good, and it's good for others. And in 11, to continue to build that relationship with God is just powerful because, what an opportunity. All relationships that we have in life, and even as people pass on, I lost my grandmother. She was the constant in our life. She was 99 years old. She taught me to pray. She taught me how to sing. She taught me how to bake. She taught me how to knit. Like, she taught me so many things in life. And I still have a relationship with her today. I still, as going through her things, I learn more and more about her still. My relationship with God is constant. It continues to grow. And as a result of continuing to grow that relationship with God, I'm able to have a relationship with myself, which I didn't get to have until I was 31 years old, which is crazy. And then I was able to have a relationship with others. And I finally got to start giving back to so many people that gave to me for so long. And the reason that man hugged me and welcomed me to Alcoholics Anonymous after doing my 5th step was because now I could actually be an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now I had something that I could actually give back. A relationship isn't all taking, it's also giving. And, at 34 years old, I got into a committed relationship with a woman I've known my whole life. And, and I carry these principles in all my affairs. And that doesn't mean just in the halls of Alcoholics Anonymous. That means into my family, into my friends, into my work life. And I continue to help others. And that doesn't mean sick and suffering comes in many different forms. And it's not just alcoholism, it's not just addiction, it's spiritual maladies. They take on all shapes and forms. And I have to keep in mind and today, that as much as I've had a spiritual awakening, I can fall back to sleep. So I need to remain vigilant. And things happen where, I experience new things in life, and I didn't realize I had certain character defects. If you don't know what your character defects are, plan a wedding. Let's learn real quick. What your character defects are. I learned all about family origin of family. But it's an experience. But it's one that I wouldn't miss for the world. And today, fear doesn't get me. The biggest things I struggle with today are self-pity and selfishness. And those two things I tend to struggle with the most. And I have to always constantly remind myself is that, you have nothing to have self-pity about. And if I'm in self-pity, I'm in self. And therefore I can't be of maximum service to others. And so that's where I'm the happiest, is when I'm helping others, when I'm talking with others. And, sometimes you get stuck and life gets busy. But gosh, I've learned that all you have to do is call another alcoholic or another friend or connect with somebody and take yourself out of self and continue to carry these principles in all of our affairs. And that's what I continue to do. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. And I hope I never, ever fall back asleep. I hope I continue to remain vigilant. And I think if I continue to put myself around people like you and continue to carry these principles and to forever be grateful for what God has given me, then I got a chance for tomorrow and the day after that. And so that's my experience. My name is Daniel, and I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniel. We appreciate you very much. All right. So there were no anniversaries tonight. If any group members would like to celebrate their anniversary at this meeting, please just let me know as soon as possible. And we do chips. Cassie, would you like to help out with that?
Yeah.
All right. Cassie.
I'm Cassie, I'm an alcoholic. This group does give out chips to those celebrating for various lengths of sobriety. If you hear me call your month, please come up and get your chips so we can celebrate with you. Is anyone celebrating 9, 10, or 11 months?
Nice.
All right.
Jesse.
Jesse.
Is anyone celebrating 6, 7, or 8 months? What do we do?
Keep coming.
Is anyone celebrating 3, 4, or 5 months? What do we do?
Keep coming.
Is anyone celebrating 2 months? What do we do?
Keep coming.
Is anyone celebrating 1 month? What do we do?
Keep coming.
Is anyone coming back 24 hours to 29 days with a desire to stay sober?
Thank you, guys.
Keep coming.
Thank you.
Anyone with a year or more, please raise your hands to show that the program works. If you haven't had a drink today, give yourself and your higher power a hand.
Thank you, Cassie. Did some people did get raffle tickets? All right. You got a number back there, Jesse?
Your chance to win a new book. 825.
825. Last 3 numbers. Raffle ticket?
825.
You got it. All right. You got a big book?
I don't have any book.
All right. Perfect. Yeah. This one of these is for you.
Big book, that's a lot to read. I guess I got a lot to read.
Yes. Thank you very much. All right. So with that, again, thank you, Daniel, and would you guys please join us in the Lord's Prayer? Whose Father, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.